بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. She says مسألة فضل المرأة, right, the water used by a woman to purify herself. So what I like about this, Imam Dhahabi does, is he mentions the chain from the madar, right? He doesn't mention the whole chain from Tirmidhi, nor does he mention just the Rawi, right? So normally when we're going to say, right, if you look at, for example, Bulugh al-Maram, it's not going to mention the madar of the hadith. So I can't see the whole picture. I have to go now find the madar of the hadith, right? So here you're giving me the madar of the hadith. So I know that Tirmidhi and others are going to be narrating from Shu'bah, or not from Shu'bah directly. Tirmidhi is way after Shu'bah, but basically this chain will revolve around Shu'bah. You can research it if you like, but that's basically what you'll find. So in the bottom here it says three Tirmidhi and others. Anyway, you can research. So basically, Imam al-Dhahabi is telling us what you need to focus is on the following. Shu'bah, fantastic, amazing, well known. عاصم الأحول, fantastic, well known. سمعت أبا حاجب يحدث عن الحكم بن عمرو الغفاري أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى أن يتوضأ أو أن يتوضأ الرجل بفضل وضوء or wudu. Wudu, the water she used. Wudu, what is left over from her process of making wudu. So wudu or wudu. حسنه تاء الترمذي. And then he says وأبو حاجب سوادة بن عاصم صالح الحديث. Right? That's not a very good thing to say. صالح الحديث. That is kind of one of the lowest levels of uh, ضعف in reality. Right? Like borderline. And it says or lowest levels of tawfiq. So Imam Ahmad narrates it. حدثنا حميد بن عبد الرحمن الرؤاسي حدثنا زهير عن داود بن عبد الله الأودي عن حميد presumably عن حميد الحميري عن صحابي مجهول. لا, it doesn't matter if it's مجهول or not. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يغتسل الرجل من فضل امرأته ولا تغتسل بفضله. قلت منكر. Right? What does that mean? It means the hadith is narrated by a weak person, A, and B, there's mukhalafa. Right? This is clearly off. Right? Munkar means literally denied. Ankartuhu, I denied him. Munkar. So it means not only is this hadith weak and therefore questionable, there's actually evidence that goes against it. Right? So it's like saying calling it denied. Right? My son, my toddler, making an accusation, and there was evidence against his accusation. So it's not only questionable to begin with because he's only a toddler, but then it's disproven. Right? قلت منكر وهو منكر often okay. وزهير هو ابن محمد فيه شيء. There's something wrong with him. Where's this Zuhair? Right here. وقيل بل زهير هو ابن معاوية الجعفي أحد الثقات الأثبات. So we don't know who this person is actually. So is he Zuhair, meaning somebody he's off, or Zuhair who is reliable? We don't know who he is. Abdullah. So here he's not mentioning his source. He's going to mention it in a second, but it says basically the madar of this chain is Abdul Aziz ibn al-Mukhtari and Asim al-Ahwali. So there is another chain going back to Asim al-Ahwal. So here we saw Shu'bah, and here we see Asim. عن عبد الله بن سرجس. So it's a totally different chain. أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم نهى أن يغتسل الرجل بفضل المرأة والمرأة بفضل الرجل ولكن يشرعان جميعا. They should start both at the same time. Right? So here, this hadith seems to support this hadith. Right? So this hadith here seems to be supported by this hadith here. The problem is, here we have Asim al-Ahwal and here we have Asim al-Ahwal. Here Asim al-Ahwal is narrating from Abu Hajib and he's narrating from Al-Hakim ibn Amr al-Ghifari. Here Asim al-Ahwal is narrating from Abdullah ibn Sarjis directly. So here there's in reality is a problem. So do we see it as supportive evidence or do we see it as that this hadith is muttarib, that's all over the place, right? So it's like this: the judge is brought. There's four people who see the act of zina. Okay, so does each is that supportive evidence or not? That's supportive evidence, right? Now the judge asks all four of them one by one, what time of day was it? One of them says it was midnight. The other one says it was midday. So now he's not going to accept anybody. So why? Because it doesn't make sense. You guys don't even know what time it is. So do we see it as supporting evidence because they both affirm the same fact, or do we see it as evidence against each other because it's chaotic and not making sense? So here there's either a problem in people who's narrating from Asim and Ahwal, or it's something that's kind of all over the place. Right? So do we see that as supporting evidence or do we see that as contradictory evidence? You can only contradict if you are similar to some extent, right? I saw Jack leaving the house. I saw Jack and Jill leaving the house. Okay? So the two pieces of information, they both confirmed that Jack was leaving the house, and one of them says that Jill was leaving as well, right? But if I'm talking about somebody says, I saw Jack leaving the house, and somebody says, I saw a cat being born, that's not related at all. You can't be, it is not even related. So when we see two pieces of evidence, they have to have certain things that are similar, right? And so therefore they're backing each other up on that similarity. But they're also the dissimilarity is also contradicting each other. So here there's a bit of a problem. Right? So he says sanaduhu jayyid, right? This chain itself is fine. وقد أخرجه ابن ماجه, right? And this hadith doesn't mention here Ibn Majah. لكن المحفوظ لعاصم حديثه عن أبي حاجب كما مر مختصرا. The محفوظ, this in reality is shadh, right? This is the correct version of the hadith. This one, sorry. This is the correct version of the hadith. And this hadith is funny, is odd. ثم لا نعلم أحدا كره للمرأة أن تتوضأ بفضل الرجل. Right? Another point of view is that we've never heard of anybody say that a woman cannot use the water that a man used. Right? So this is also important concept. He's talking as a faqih and a muhaddith, is the content is funny, right? Because nobody has ever seen to act upon this hadith. So here, this hadith, which is the more accurate version, says the Prophet ﷺ forbade a man making wudu with the water of a woman, but not vice versa. Right? And we never heard of anybody say that it's haram. So the fact that there's no discussion on it, right? So Imam Malik, for example, doesn't mention these hadiths, but he mentions that it's fine. Right? He mentions that it's fine. He doesn't say, well, there's this hadith in Ibn Majah, of course, because Ibn Majah's 2 generations after him, right? But he mentions the debate, right? So we see that the Salaf had that debate. The Salaf did not have this debate, right? it's important, like what is in the mind of the Salaf or the earliest Salaf, etc. Or So here we've never. So this is odd, not only because of the chain of transmission, but also the content. We've never heard of people saying this. In reality, this hadith does say that, right? But Imam Dhahabi is saying in terms of an ikhtilaf among the fuqaha, we've never seen anybody say anything like that. And that's important, right? For example, that hadith where the Prophet ﷺ kisses one of his wives and then goes and prays without making wudu. One of the versions of that hadith goes through a Zuhri, right? Ha had that been the case, Zuhri would have held that opinion that kissing your wife doesn't break wudu, but he didn't. So it's awfully odd that somebody narrates a hadith that's so important like that, but then doesn't act upon it at all, right? Had he narrated it, or had it been sound, he would have acted upon it usually, right? And so this fishy. So looking at fiqh opinions is very important, right? Fiqh and hadith and fiqh, they go hand in hand, right? It's very important. I remember one of my friends, I was discussing with my friends, one of the reasons why some people become very unhealthy, unhealthy in their fiqh is not studying hadith, right? So if you look at, for example, the hadith studies was a big thing in Andalus, right? In Andalus, you see it as well a big thing in Indo-Pak, right? So it's something that should make people less strict, right? So this is sometimes one of the problems with the Indo-Pak fiqh is that it's very strict and narrow-minded, or it's presented in a strict and narrow-minded way, and it makes people want to leave it, right? So it's whereas we shouldn't really be like that if we're continually seeing the different verses of the Quran and different hadith that imply different things. He says وحجة من ترخص في الأمرين, i.e. the two matters, i.e. a man making wudu from his wife, or a woman's wudu, or a woman from her husband's, is الثوري وأبو الأحوص, so two of them, عن سماك بن حرب عن أكرمة عن ابن عباس أن امرأة من أزواج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اغتسلت من جنابة فاغتسل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم وتوضأ من فضلها. And where is this hadith found? Oh, okay, so it mentions it in Musnad Ahmad and other places. وفي لفظ من جفنة. So here it says من جنابة من جفنة. One is from janaba, the other one is from a small container of water. ولفظ أحمد عن عبد الرزاق أي الصنعاني عن الثوري سماعا. So سماعا here it's not clear. Does it mean Abdul Razzaq hearing directly from a Thawri, or does it mean Thawri hearing directly from Simak? Not sure, but anyway the point is Simak from Akrimah ibn Abbas. فجاء النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يتوضأ من فضلها فقال إني اغتسلت منه قال إن الماء لا ينجسه شيء. أحمد حدثنا أبو النضر حدثنا شريك ابن عبد الله عن سماك, so he has another chain, عن عكرمة عن ابن عباس عن ميمونة أجنبت أنا ورسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فاغتسلت من جفنة ففضلت فضلة فجاء رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليغتسل منها فقلت إني قد اغتسلت منها قال إن الماء ليس عليه جنابة أو لا ينجسه شيء فاغتسل منه. أخرجه عين واو وصححه تاء. So عين واو I believe is عين واو is استخرج على الصحيح مسلم. How's his name? Abu Awana. So here it just mentioned from the six books: Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i, Ibn Majah. Let's look at the beginning of the book if he mentions Ain Wow. You mentioned before we pause the recording, there's two Abu Awanas. Abu Awana is a teacher of the author of the six books, or at least some of them, Tirmidhi and others. And then there's Abu Awana, who I believe is a student of Imam Muslim, who has Mustakhraj Abu Awana ala Sahih Muslim and Mustakhraj ala Sahih Bukhari, I believe. I think has both. What does Mustakhraj mean? Meaning he gets the hadith in Sahih Muslim and he narrates them with a different chain. Right? So it's useful because they have different wordings, different etc. Ask not sure if this is an agreed upon. I can't see this sign being used. Oh, that's why. I can't see this. I'm presuming it is Abu Awana, but I can't see this thing being used. Allahu Alam. Right. So another use as well for of the mustakhraj of Abu Awana is that sometimes you see a hadith. Number one is the hadith is not there to begin with. In Sahih Muslim, so you might add some hadiths which are useful. Number two is that you see a hadith in Sahih Muslim and you're confused why it's Sahih. Doesn't really look sahih. And then you see the mustakhraj of Abu Awana and you see another chain for it, like, oh, that's why. There's other support, the other chains that back it up. Okay, that was that issue. The next issue then is مسألة يجوز عند الحنفية إزالة النجاسة بالمائعات. You can use other liquids besides water to remove filth, right? Because removing filth is not an act of worship. So therefore you don't need, you know, the default is just remove filth, right? So there's no ta'abbud in it, right? There's no niyyah. We all agree there's no niyyah. So why would there be any particular way to do it? So then he mentions again the madar. أكرمة بن عمار حدثنا إسحاق بن عبد الله عن أنس عن عن أنس عمه قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قاعدا في المسجد فبال أعرابي في المسجد فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لرجل قم فأتنا بدلو من الماء. This is elegance, not the water, but of water, right? من ماء من الماء, the same. فسنه, to pour it over. فسنه عليه. فأتى بدلو فسنه عليه. So he brought a bucket of water and poured it over. Right? So it says سنده حسن لكنه لا يدل. This sound chain transmission is sound, but that doesn't really tell us anything. And where is the source for this hadith? It doesn't mention where the hadith is found, so I'm not sure the madar is where. Right? And then he says هشام بن عروة عن فاطمة بنت المنذر عن أسماء أتت امرأة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقالت يا رسول الله المرأة يصيبها من دم حيضتها فقال لتحته ثم لتقرصه بماء ثم لتصلي فيه. Right? She should, so if a woman, there's some blood from her period onto her clothes, what she's supposed to do, he says he should scrape it and then wash it with water and then pray in it, i.e., even though the traces are still there. So, not sure why, where the evidence is here at all. Right? In reality, you find it. The evidence is not is in reality the use of the evidence. So, if the Prophet ﷺ told a woman to use water, that doesn't mean you can only use water, right? So we need evidence that you cannot use something else. Right? So the Hanafis are saying, well, the default, it's not active worship, it's not tawqifi, it's not based on, don't need to have any particular evidence. You don't. So for the prayer, if you don't know the process and prayed in that way, then you can't pray in that way. But for removing filth is not an act of worship, so you don't need to have, right, any particular thing there. You need to have evidence that says you can't use something else. Right? So the fact that the Prophet told somebody to use water, that doesn't mean you can't use anything other than water. Right? And also many of the Salaf, you find this many of the Salaf using other things. Okay. مسألة الوضوء بالنبيذ جائز عند أبي حنيفة. So nabidh here doesn't mean alcohol. Nabidh here means water that has changed through mix with water, such that it's now something else. Right? You put some fruits into it. It doesn't go alcoholic, but it now changes. Right? It says صحح الترمذي من حديث الثوري عن خالد عن أبي قلابة عن عمرو بن بوجدان عن أبي ذر أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن الصعيد الطيب طهور المسلم وإن لم يجد الماء 10 سنين. رواه أبو داود والترمذي والنسائي. So pure earth or pure stones, according to the tafsir of the Malikis and Hanafis, is the purification of a believer, even if he can't find water for 10 years. So the whole point of tayammum is if you could use something other than water, then why would you go from water to earth? That doesn't make sense. Why would you do that? Why don't you go from water to something other than water, and then from something other than water to to earth, right? So here we're talking about wudu. Wudu is a ritual. The default is it has to be demonstrated and shown. We don't know that the Prophet ﷺ or the Sahaba ever used anything other than water. Excuse me. So therefore, water has to be used. So the hujjah here, this is one mas'ala with najasa, right? And the default is the Hanafis are right until proven otherwise. Here, the default is the Hanafis are wrong until proven otherwise, right? He says حجتهم المسند أي مسند الإمام أحمد حدثنا عبد الرزاق حدثنا سفيان عن أبي فزارة العبسي حدثنا أبو زيد مولى عمرو بن الحريث عن ابن مسعود قال لما كان ليلة الجن, when the night of the jinn happened, when it existed, right? This is fa'il of kana. So kana can have either an ism and a khabar, or it can have a fa'il when you mean it existed, right? Kana Allahu, Allah was, Allah existed. Allah, that's the fa'il of kana, not the ism of kana. قال قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أمعك ماء, do you have any water with you? قلت ليس معي ماء, I do not have any water with me. ولكن معي إداوة فيها نبيذ, but I have a small container in which there is some water that has been changed through fruits added to it. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تمرة طيبة وماء طهور. He says that's fine. It is, so it's sticky perhaps, but it is nice dates and it is purifying water. So therefore you can use this. He says رواه أحمد عن يحيى بن زكريا عن إسرائيل عن أبي فزارة وزاد فتوضأ منها ثم صلى بنا. أخرجه داود الترمذي وابن ماجه من حديث شريك. So here this is from Sufyan. Here this is from إسرائيل. Here this is from شريك وغيره عن أبي فزارة وهو صالح ولكن أبو زيد مجهول. Who is Abu Zayd? Oh, here. So from Abi Fazara, this person, Abu Zayd, from the student of Abdullah Mas'ud. Don't know who he is. So everything's fine, but there's this person, one particular person in the chain, we don't even know who he is to begin with. So all these different people narrate from Abi Fazara from an unknown individual, Abu Zayd. I don't know who he is. أحمد حدثنا يحيى بن إسحاق حدثنا أنبأنا ابن لهيعة عن قيس بن الحجاج عن حنشن الصنعاني عن صنعاني عن ابن عباس عن ابن مسعود أنه كان مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ليلة الجن فقال يا عبد الله أمعك ماء قال معي نبيذ قال أصبب. This is اللغة of Mecca and Medina, the Hijaz. أصبب, pour it علي. فتوضأ فقال يا عبد الله شراب وطهور. Right, this is a drink and this is also a thing to be used for purification. هذا ضعيف. Right, Ibn Lahiya is ضعيف, is weak to begin with. I'm not sure what else is wrong with the chain. حماد بن سلمة, the madar of the hadith. عن علي بن زيد. So again, what's the point of mentioning the madar of the hadith? I'm only interested from the madar of the hadith on. Don't give me a chain like Abu Dawood's full chain, because if Abu Dawood has the chain, Ibn Majah has the chain, everybody has the chain, and all the chains go through one particular person, one or two or three people up in the chain. Just start from there, because I don't need to research random names, right? That's like how do I like? It's like looking at the name of the printer. I don't need to find the name of the printer. It's fine. I need to know which physical printer, which individual printed this thing. It doesn't matter because it's widespread. And the Nabi Sallallahu okay. So this chain says Abu Salama, who is good, عن علي بن زيد, عن أبي رافع, عن ابن مسعود. Right. So here it says ضبب عليه المصنف للانقطاع. It's the author, Imam al-Dhahabi, he kind of put a little kind of circle around this name, saying because there's a gap in the chain here. So from Abi Rafi' to Abdullah bin Mas'ud, there's a gap in the chain. أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال له ليلة الجن أمعك ماء؟ قال لا لكن معي نبيذ. قال نعم فتوضأ به. لم يسمع أبو رافع من ابن مسعود. So there's a gap in the chain there. أخرجه الدارقطني. So this is in the 4th century. I believe Daraqutni passed away in 360, I believe. وسنده مقارب, يعني 50-50. لكن أساء بإخراج حديث الحسين بن عبيد الله العجلي الكذاب. Right, so the hadith here is narrated by a fabricator of hadith. أنبأنا أبو معاوية عن الأعمش عن أبي وائل عن عبد الله عبد الله مسعود كنت مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم ليلة الجن فأتاهم. Which is the whole chain. ثم ساقه من حديث محمد بن عيسى المدائني, and he says واهن. Here's another chain. This person is very weak. أنبأنا الحسن بن قتيبة واهن, very weak. أنبأنا يونس عن أبي إسحاق عن أبي عبيدة وأبي الأحوص عن ابن مسعود قال مر بي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خذ معك إداوة من ماء ثم انطلق وأنا معه فلما فرغت عليه من إداوة إذ هو نبيذ. It wasn't actually water, it was actually this juice or this non-alcoholic that changed water. فقلت يا رسول الله أخطأت بالنبيذ قال تمرة حلوة وماء عذب. Not a big deal. And then it says وخرج الدارقطني عن الصوافي عن إسحاق بن أبي حسان عن هشام بن خالد الأزرقي حدثنا الوليد قال أنبأنا معاوية بن سلام عن أخيه زيد عن جده أبي سلام عن قيلان بن غيلان الثقفي أنه هو سمع ابن مسعود يقول دعاني رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليلة الجن بوضوء, right, wudu, something to make water wudu with. فجئته بإداوة فإذا فيها نبيذ فتوضأ. So he made wudu with نبيذ. سنده نظيف وفلان لا يعرف. Who's فلان? Oh, so and so. Yeah. وخرج وخرج للمسيب بن واضح وفيه ضعف. حدثنا مبشر عن الأوزاعي عن يحيى presumably يحيى بن سعيد القطان presumably آه عن إكرمة عن ابن عباس مرفوعا النبيذ وضوء لمن لم يجد الماء. هذا حديث منكر. We've never seen a hadith like this.
See, the nadif is the mean lugha meaning, or is it like a istilah?
نظيف is not, it's not a term. It's like, it's nice. It's a nice
Okay.
clean shape. Looks like jayyid. It's not a term. He says يروي ويروى عن أبان. There we go. وهو تالف. سبحان الله أبان. There we go. Just your day. عن أكرمة نحو عن نحوه نائب الفاعل في يروى. Right. Here we go. This is the summary of the class. Allah. There we go. That's the summary of the class, Aban, okay?
Noted, Siri.
ومما يوهي shows how واهي it is الخبر أن في الصحيح عن ابن عباس أنه سئل أكنت مع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ليلة الجن قال لا. Right. وعن الحارث الأعور عن علي جواز الوضوء بالماء. Right. So anyway, so notice how we've seen this before, Aban and others. Imam Muslim um, in the Tamyiz, right? He's not just looking at the chain; he's also looking at the content. And so here, there's a Sahih hadith that goes against this. It says Abdullah Mas'ud was asked, "Were you even there on the night of the jinn?" He said, "No." So all of this is a bit funny then. Inshallah, we'll stop here. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.